So we're going to begin this course on this very interesting text on death, intermediate state, and rebirth. We're going to begin with a little motivation, meditation. And Diana had mentioned before that some of the people in her karate were exhausted from so many days of teachings with the great lamas recently. So she wanted a dynamic meditation. I've already passed out some chocolate-covered coffee beans, but that may not be enough. So, okay. So we're going to do the breathing 9-round breathing meditation, and try to. You remember from the Lan Rim course and from other courses, 9-round breathing meditation means that you can do with the facility of your finger. You breathe in first of all through your right nostril, and you imagine the channel that we'll be talking about in this course. The nadi is called in Sanskrit. In Tibetan they say tsa, which means channel or nerve sometimes. It goes up around the crown chakra, down past the throat chakra, past the heart chakra, down to the navel. You imagine breathing in white light, which represents all of the blessings. Imagine breathing in the blessings of all the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, filling up the right nadi, holding it down at the navel, and even imagine sort of pushing it down there. And that white light fills your body and burns up all of the negative energy currents, the other defiled winds in your body, which then amass in the as yet unfilled left nadi, because you breathe in the right nadi. You begin with an exhalation, breathe in the right nadi. The left nadi fills up, and then after some time you breathe out the left nostril, imagining all of the negativity in the left nadi that has been amassed there. The defiled winds are expelled. And you do that slowly. Imagine beyond Santa Cruz, or wherever you are, Leningrad or wherever, beyond the world, beyond the solar system, beyond this universe, so that the defiled energy has nothing to do with you any longer. And then without moving the finger, you've moved the finger from the right. So the right nostril was open so that the left nostril was open. You breathe in the left nostril, filling up the left nadi down to the navel with white light and inspiration. And then you change the position of the finger again and hold it at the navel for some time, imagining all the negative energy burned up, and breathe that out, especially the energy of fatigue, unclear mind, discursive thoughts, laziness, whatever. Breathe that out in the form of black light so that it has nothing to do with you. Or also, you can think, the discursive thoughts that are causing me to be agitated or think about other things, imagine that they are dispelled. And then after that, you put your hands at your navel and you breathe in both nostrils after having expelled from the right nostril, down to the navel, and imagine now that all of that energy goes into the central channel, the Sushumna, the channel that goes from the brow to the crown, down the throat, heart, navel, and secret place chakras. All of the energy goes into that and fills up the central channel, and all of the negative energy that is purified by that also enters in there. So all the discursive thoughts, all the laziness, all the fatigue enters into the central channel and is not expelled. You breathe out at the end, but you don't imagine that it's coming out the nostrils. You imagine all that energy goes into the central channel. And then you do that 2 more rounds. Does that make sense? Okay, let's do that first of all, and then we'll do a very short motivation. So I won't lead it. You do it at your own rate. Once you've completed the cycle of 9 rounds of breathing, put your attention on your mental consciousness. Don't pay attention to the darkness or light from your eyes or the sound from your ears or the tactile sensation from your body. Sense. And don't be distracted by the inner distractions within your mind, the various discursive thoughts that will be arising due to karma and due to associations of what you've been thinking about. Rather, refocus on the spaciousness around those thoughts, the clear light nature of the mind. Like a vast, infinite expanse. Even your body disappearing. The conception of yourself as an observer disappearing. Let go again and again of whatever comes to your mind. Refocus on the spaciousness within which it's arising, the subjective mind rather than the objective thoughts. Then remembering that we have a life of leisure and endowment that's very meaningful. We can use it to achieve enlightenment or liberation, create the causes for their quick achievement in lives very soon, create the causes of continuity of rebirths in the upper realms as a human, closing the door to the lower realms. Very difficult to achieve such a rebirth. The causes are pure morality, very, very strong morality, practice of generosity, at least, and of the 6 perfections at least, and the rest of the perfections for completion, and stainless prayer that motivates to bring all of these karmic seeds together to ripen at the same time. Mind of bodhicitta suffices for all of those. Recall also that this incredible opportunity is passing in every moment, that will definitely end. When, we don't know. But with every moment we're getting closer to that death. And the only thing that will help us at the time of death is the karmic seeds, the virtuous dharma that we've practiced this lifetime, the familiarity of dharma, so that we can die with the mind unattached, without hatred, without ignorance and clinging. Recognizing that we have, up till now, created numberless negative imprints in our mind to be born in the lower realms, even perhaps today. Holding some people close with attachment, although we think of that as noble, holding others as distant out of a mind of aversion and hatred. although we might even imagine that is correct and noble. Our destination, unless we were to do something for our mind, is probably the lower realms, the hell realm, a life as a hungry ghost, a preta, or an animal, for many, many lifetimes, some of them very, very long, of long duration. So with that preoccupation, that fear, and at least a hope and confidence eventually and faith that Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha can protect us from those. I think the main object I take refuge in now is Dharma, that which can protect me from that suffering of the lower realms, protect me from the fear of samsara on the intermediate level, protect me from the fears of nirvana, of solitary peace for the individual highest scope. The Dharma that we practice now, even as Venerable Truden Rinpoche said, even what we have now, our practice of Dharma, is not the actual Dharma jewel, true cessations and true paths. To consider whatever Dharma functions for our mind to calm it. Patience, loving, compassion, an understanding of impermanence, and so forth. Consider that our actual Dharma jewel. That's what we're taking refuge in, rather than our usual recourse to pleasure of the senses, notoriety, fame, and so forth. Control, power, wealth. So to really cut the continuity of rebirth through Highest Yoga Tantra, which we have the good fortune to have encountered and perhaps to practice this lifetime, we have to understand these three basic processes of death, intermediate state, the bardo, and rebirth. So with the thought of eventually achieving enlightenment for the sake of all living beings who have been depthlessly kind, even now, even when they appear as enemy, giving us a chance to overcome our pride, to practice patience, to accumulate virtue. For the sake of each and every sentient being, I'm going to listen to this course, especially this evening, overcome fatigue, keep my mind sharp, for the sake of getting closer to understanding enlightenment, for the sake of all living beings. And then bring your attention back. Present. How's your meditation? Any observation? How's your meditation work after many months of meditating like this? Can you overcome discursive thoughts quickly?
But not completely.
Why not completely? Okay. Mm-hmm. You're still with? Yeah, human doesn't mean you can't. Human beings can overcome discursive thoughts. So that's in there. You're meaning it in some kind of humanistic way. Oh, I'm still human. Okay, so that's where. So that's why we need to also to develop concentration. You can see that. That's what Atisha said in the Lamp of the Path to Enlightenment, that the Bodhisattvas, if they really want to achieve realizations for the sake of sentient beings, they really have to put effort to develop shamatha, tranquil abiding, because the virtue that we have, that we create now, is so weak, and we can't focus our mind for a long time. Discursive thoughts come and so forth. But this kind of meditation can help. This is the first step. Michelle, how about you? How was your meditation? What was it?
That's fine.
It's fine? Okay. I thought you said sweet. Okay. This course is one of the supplementary topics to the basic program, and the text of it is very, very interesting. I have an old edition of the book. Maybe someone has a new edition. It was, it's called Death, Intermediate State, and Rebirth. That's not the actual title of the Tibetan book. That's part of the title. It's more like lamp thoroughly illuminating the presentation of the three basic bodies: death, intermediate state, and rebirth. Are death, intermediate state, and rebirth the three basic bodies? Anyway, we'll see. So this is, although it says by, it seems to say by Lati Rinpoche and Jeffrey Hopkins, actually what it is a text by a famous Tibetan Lama, Ganchen Yangchen Gawe Lodro. I think it's called Akya Yongzen, who we had encountered when we studied Lorig. One of the texts that I had made mention of, and some of you may have used, the Ways of Knowing. Did you have the text, Thea? Ways of Knowing? Yeah? That was the root text of that. Although there was commentary by Geshe Darge, the root text of that was also by the same Lama, Akya Yongzen. Some of you may remember. So Lati Rinpoche gave commentary on that, which was translated by Jeffrey Hopkins. So Don, could you hold up your new book? So those of you who don't have, we have some. Most of you have some printouts. Did you get back there, David? Could you pass out? Could you hand these to David and Deanne? Someone? No. Well, whatever. If you don't mind, David. We need two. Thanks. Okay. So that's just the first couple of pages. So those of you can, if you haven't gotten the book yet, Venerable Somo has ordered it and should be here by Thursday. Some of you have it, but at least you have the text for tonight. And those of you who are interested in studying Tibetan, the first page, some of the courageous ones are going to study Tibetan. Pat, are you going to join the Tibetan class? Okay. Okay. I'm just joking. So, Don, did you held up that book? The new edition is by Snow Lion. You might still find some old edition somewhere by Ryder, the English. I think it's an English company. It was essentially the same text. So this is a text that's connected with. It's actually in relationship to Tantra. So in a sense, it's connected with some of the units in the basic program, such as the grounds and paths of secret mantra, which is one of the texts. Nagi Salam is part of the curriculum of the basic program, right? This is a text connected with that, and also of incredibly general interest, because of the incredible amount of detail about these three states: death, the bardo, which in English we say the intermediate state, and rebirth. So it can be taken. We won't be, hopefully, revealing any crucial secrets of Tantra. This text was published, obviously, with the approval of His Holiness and Lati Rinpoche, so although it seems to be talking about tantric subjects, some of them are not so crucial in terms of revealing secrets of Tantra. Also, it's very related to the Lan Rim, say meditation on death. There are different ways of meditating on death. Remember, in the Lan Rim, what's the main outlines of meditation on death in the Lan Rim stages of the path? Do you remember, Carrie? How many? The 8-round meditation on death? The 7-round? The 11-round meditation on death? The 9-round meditation on death, right? Do you know Diane? Or Diane? So that'd be something to familiarize with in conjunction with this, although it's not part of the text. 3 main outlines: death is definite, the time of death is indefinite or uncertain. The only thing that helps at the time of death is dharma, each of them have 3 reasons to prove them. There's what we call the 9-round meditation on death. So supplementary to that, in meditating on death, you can imagine your own death and actually meditate on the dissolution of the elements that we'll be talking about here, which is what the yoginis and the yogis do through meditation. They induce the dissolution of the elements. They're not going to induce death by doing so. You don't have to worry, oh, you're getting too close to, I shouldn't do this, maybe I'll die or something. You don't have to worry like that. In fact, those errors do absorb anyway at the time of sleep, of deep sleep every night. And in the dream state, they oscillate in and out into the central channel. So this is getting familiar with all of these different parts that are very essential to understand how to practice Highest Yoga Tantra. Some of you have received empowerments into. Okay, so let's take a look at the book. I'm not sure if it has the same introduction and foreword as this old edition I have, but let me read a little bit of the foreword by His Holiness from this edition. Does it start out in your edition, the foreword, through the afflictions of desire, hatred, and ignorance? Yeah, okay, so the same. So His Holiness says, through the afflictions of desire, hatred, and ignorance, contaminated karma, or in other words, actions, are performed. Right? Through the afflictions, that means the delusions of attachment, which is called here desire, hatred or anger, and ignorance. They're called sometimes the 3 poisonous minds, right? All of the other 84,000 delusions, the rest of the 84,000 delusions can all be included in those. Through the power of those, contaminated karma is created. Contaminated? What's the opposite of contaminated karma? Uncontaminated karma? I'll ask Harry again. Yes. There you go. You thought it was a trick question. It wasn't going to be uncontaminated. So uncontaminated karma is the kind of karma actions that are created within the sphere of not giving rise to these root delusions and not giving rise to grasping at true existence. So human beings that are still human, can create uncontaminated karma, but probably unless we've realized emptiness, we haven't created any uncontaminated karma. We might think we have. We've created virtuous karma, but virtuous karma also can be contaminated with the grasping at true existence. So contaminated karma here doesn't mean really bad, evil sort of things. It even can be virtuous actions that can be contaminated by grasping to true existence. Does that make sense, David? Maybe? Yeah. Filia?
With uncontaminated karma, would that be something like a karma that is continually something that we're working through, and it, each time we work through a piece of that karma, it becomes less and less, so eventually it becomes uncontaminated karma, and with still seeds remaining of that karma, like that. I mean, is that kind of like how karma is diminished and eventually dissolves?
See, karma is not, it depends on what you mean by karma is diminished. There's 2 different things. There's the actions that we create, which are actually called karma. Sometimes we know if you win the lottery, or if your satchel gets stolen, you say, oh, that's my karma. Actually, what we should say precisely is, that's the ripening of the seeds that were deposited by my past karma, whether it was virtuous or non-virtuous. So to say that our karma is diminished, the karma that we've created is already finished, ceased. The karma that we created past. The karmic seeds of that may reside on our mind stream unless they've ripened and we've experienced the fruit of them, or they've been annihilated either through purification, through the 4 opponent forces of negative karma, or you can annihilate virtuous karma through anger and wrong view and other kinds of, abandoning the Dharma and so forth. So the various, and maybe regret. regretting the virtuous things you did. Oh, I shouldn't have given that money to that beggar. I could have bought a coffee at Starbucks. You know, so regretting the virtue that you did would be diminishing, possibly even annihilating the virtue. So, but that's not annihilating the karma. It's annihilating the imprints that were deposited by the karma. So, it may be that our actions habitually come up again. You know, so if you're talking about it in that way, over time, we may have the opportunity to get angry. You know, we may think it's the time to get angry, but we may, in cultivating our mind, we may respond to that stimulus in a different way over time, or, you know, attachment. We may respond to it at a different time. So the whole aim of what we're doing in Dharma practice is to prepare especially for the time of death. So our mind is very familiar. Our mind will not be disturbed at the time of death. And whatever virtuous seeds that we've created, hopefully by enthusiastic perseverance, creating a lot of virtue, that can help to impel us, besides the realizations that we have, to another future life where we can finish the path if we don't finish it this lifetime. So through the afflictions of desire, hatred, and ignorance, contaminated actions, or karma, are performed, which establish potencies in the mind in the form of predispositions. So it's another way of saying which leaves seeds in our consciousness that can give rise to different effects. Some of those karmic seeds, if they have been enabled, empowered by a complete path of action. Remember, like when we talk about the 10 paths of negative paths of action, the 10 non-virtuous actions. If you have them complete, they can actually, the ripening effect can actually be rebirth in one of the lower realms. If it's virtuous karma, it can be rebirth in the upper realms, or it can give rise to having wealth or success or bad luck or short life or not having the resources that you wish, so forth. When a lifetime finishes, a person who has such predispositions is born again in cyclic existence, born again in samsara, with a mind and body appropriated through these contaminated causes. Remember, we talk about it, the appropriated aggregates. That is, our subtle mind, in a sense, appropriates, due to the past karmic imprints on it, a new life due to these contaminated causes. Does it make sense so far? Michelle, you making sense? Perfect. Jesse, you understand? Yeah. Some persons, would you say some persons or some people? Anyway, some persons die upon the full exhaustion of the impetus of that action which, in another lifetime, laid the foundation for this one. This is Jeffrey Hopkins translating very precisely. So what is it talking about? Some people die upon the full exhaustion of the impetus of that action which in another lifetime laid the foundation for this one. In other words, say for instance, this lifetime is thrown, in a sense, by the karma that we created in a previous lifetime. The lifespan that we have, there's a certain lifespan that we have the capacity of living, of experiencing, right? That is not something that is easily changed. In the sutra system, it's very difficult to change that at all. In Tantra, it is possible, perhaps, to change the length of one's lifespan. But some people will die if they don't have some other karma that arises beforehand. Some of them may die when that karma that through this lifetime, the impetus for this lifetime, is exhausted. So maybe they die at 89 or 104, or maybe their karma was only 49. They might have died at 49. Or how old are you, Georgie? 28? 28. 27. They might die at 27. So you never know. You have to practice dharma. So that's that sense. So some people might just live a normal lifetime and live a death which was, in a sense, timely, in the opposite of untimely. Others die without having used up their allotted time. You might say, well, how come? They had time. How do they do that? Through the incompletion of the causes of sustaining life, such as the lack of necessities. And so that could be not just necessities like you don't have a coffee pot or a new car, but food, you die of starvation, or oxygen, or you don't have the necessity, the medicine to cure the disease that you have that can cut your life short. So some of that karma that impelled your lifetime, it might have been that you had a possible lifespan of 84 years or something. Some of that may not be used. Yeah.
But couldn't those factors that you just talked about, shortening the lifetime, couldn't those have been seeds from bad karma from your
Definitely. It's all the result of karma. It's all the result of karma, but there's different karma. If you're precise, you see, the person had a certain karmic impetus here, as he's calling a certain lifespan that was thrown or impelled by the karma that threw us into this lifetime, the maturation of this lifetime. But even within that, other karma that we've created can interfere and shorten our lifetime. You may have also create the karma to have an argument with someone and be killed in the argument, or not have an argument, just walking down the street helping people and brick falls on your head or something like that, some karma. So those are also the result of karma. It's not as though they're not, it's just accident or fate. That's still due to your karma, but it's not the throwing karma that impelled this lifetime. This is called untimely death, when the full length of your life is not used. This is called untimely death, or death upon the consumption of merit. For the impetus for the action that established this life remains. There is still some power of that, but external concordant circumstances that are achieved through other meritorious actions in previous lives do not exist. Does that make sense? Sounds very technical, but do you understand? You have to read it carefully. Dave, do you understand? Tracking. It's like rocking. You get that? You get that? No? Okay. Mensa. This is called untimely death, or death upon the consumption of merit. So it can be, we can die, not, maybe that sentence a little bit, I'm not sure if he translated what His Holiness actually said correctly, because consumption of merit, your merit can be totally consumed, and you might not have the merit to be able to find the resources, even air or something like that, or warmth. Whereas there is other kind of karma that arises due to negative actions, not just the consuming of merit, but negative actions that you created that can bring about, the experience of weapons, or, being hit by others, or so the different ways that untimely death can take place, right? Is that not clear? Leo's thing has a, making sense? No?
Yeah, there's a lot in here.
Yes, it's very precise, very succinct, and it's susceptible to even we think, oh, the foreword, this is easy. This is the easy part. You think, whoa, this is page one. Not even page one of the text. This is just the foreword. Okay.
I think, Venerable, what is that? I think some of us have always thought of our life and what happens through it as that's our karma for this life.
Yeah. Well, so you didn't listen carefully during the long rim section on death. That's the problem. Okay, because we talked about this, the different causes of death. Okay, just not to. We've talked about this before. Some of you have recall when we talked about death. The reason that death takes place is either the merit that the karma that threw you into this lifetime is totally consumed. So that would be called a normal death, a timely death. That's what you're thinking. But also, even if you had the karma to live 100 years, other karma can interfere with that, in the sense that you've created some negative karma that can cause some other interference to arise. Like the body very sensitive. You can get a virus or a cancer or something like that. Also, you can consume your merit by never creating more merit. Maybe you came into this lifetime with merit to live this lifetime, to have a certain amount of resources, but maybe you didn't even have the merit to have something essential for your life, food or warmth or oxygen or other things, or medicine, say, if you're dying. So there can be various karmic reasons why that karma that threw you into this lifetime is shortened. Some of them because of negative karma you've created that definitely shows an event that causes an event that curtails that life. Other kinds of events where you've consumed your merit to the extent that you don't have enough merit to live out that life. So it's slightly different. So that's why I was saying I'm not sure His Holiness said it. It almost sounds like that's the same thing. There's two different ways that the life can be shortened like that. A person dies within a virtuous, a non-virtuous, or a neutral mind. What does that mean? Within. That means their mind is either, at the time of actual death, their mind is either going to be virtuous, non-virtuous, or neutral. Can it be both? Virtuous and... Pardon? Within a virtuous mind. Okay, well, it's just, with a virtuous mind, dies with a virtuous mind. It means the state of mind that exists when they die, when we say within, is going to be one of those three. There's not a fourth state. Can your mind be both virtuous and non-virtuous at the same time?
I suppose it could flash back and forth.
The speed of light. What if you're seeing Buddha? Isn't that a virtuous state of mind? And getting angry at Buddha, and then you're angry at the same time, negative? What do you think, Mark? Is it Mark? I forgot. Mark? The other Mark. If you're seeing Buddha, is that a virtuous state of mind?
I think so, yeah, totally.
I'm not sure it's a virtuous state of mind. It's you're creating virtue by the power of the object. So it's not called a virtuous state of mind. You might be angry, like you see your guru, and maybe at the time of that, he's not helping me, or she's not helping me, or something. So you might be creating some virtue, but that's not called a virtuous state of mind. A virtuous state of mind or a non-virtuous state of mind would be recognized by whether there are virtuous mental factors present or non-virtuous mental factors, the delusions, the afflictions present. Okay? So a person dies in one of those three states, obviously. In the first case, a virtuous state of mind, a dying person might take to mind a virtuous object, such as the three jewels, the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. He says the doctrine and the spiritual community. Or his own Lama, her own Lama, thereby generating a mind of faith. That's just one example. That's not the only kind of way that you can die. For instance, you can also die by meditating on emptiness or on compassion. And that's why it's very useful if a Dharma practitioner is facing death, that whatever pain there is, that they try to bear as much as possible and keep a clear mind to be able to meditate, to die with a virtuous state of mind, rather than being tranquilized where they might die in a neutral state of mind, or maybe even as the tranquilization or the, what is it called, morphine or pain reliever or whatever. Pat was giving me a big explanation of pain relievers the other day. That the pain reliever, maybe as that is really very heavy one, say if you're getting a morphine drip, is that what they call it now for people that have cancer and you're becoming unconscious? Maybe in that process a negative mind rises and you wouldn't have the chance of actually countering that. So, or he or she might cultivate immeasurable equanimity, becoming free from desire and hatred toward any sentient being, or meditate on emptiness or cultivate compassion. This can be done either through one's own remembering to do such, or through others' urging. In other words, the so-called Tibetan Book of the Dead. I don't know why. There's no book that I know of in Tibetan that's called the Tibetan Book of the Dead. I think it came about because there was this famous, in Egyptian, I'm not even sure it's called the Egyptian Book of the Dead, but they have, remember that was in the archaeological interests or in the early part of the century. And some people who wrote about Tibetan Buddhism encountered some Kagyu lamas who talked about the famous book, the Bardo Todal, which Bardo means intermediate state, Bardo, intermediate. To means to hear, and Drol means liberation. So it means liberation through hearing in the Bardo. It doesn't mean you're in the Bardo and you hear. It means liberation in the Bardo through being urged now, hearing the urging of others reading to you. Now, in the first day, you do this and this. So, in a sense, this is a little bit what His Holiness is talking about here. Others urging, like if someone is dying, your Dharma friends, to remind them, meditate on compassion, remember the triple gem, emptiness, try to leave a seed. So that even if the person's mind starts to wander, they can be urged, either through your own remembering or the urging of others to do so, to practice virtue at that time. If such attitudes are cultivated at the point of death, this means virtuous attitudes, one dies within a virtuous mind. Does that sound okay? With a virtuous mind, in a virtuous mind, through which one's rebirth is improved. It is good to die in this way. Why does it make a big difference if you have a virtuous mind or a non-virtuous mind? Who knows? Dave, do you know?
Well, I assume you're planting seeds right then and there with your mind. And as you go into the Bardo, that you're going in with a predisposition, whether it's virtuous or non-virtuous.
So you were going to say something? No. Okay. The karma that you're creating karma certainly at the time of death and at the moments beforehand, but maybe that karma is not going to be of sufficient intensity to ripen in the next instant. Usually karma ripens at the earliest in the next lifetime. It's not going to ripen in the Bardo, probably, that karma. But what the actions that you're creating at that time, the virtuous state of mind that you have, is one of the links, can help to create the links called craving, grasping, and becoming of the 12 links at the time of death, and can cause virtuous seeds that are already on your mind stream to ripen. On the other hand, as we will be explaining here in a minute, if, for instance, you were craving warmth, say it was cold, and you were, oh, it'd be nice to be warm, that can create the cause, that can ripen the causes that you already have on your mind stream to be born in the hot hells, seeking warmth. It doesn't mean that that karma that you're creating right then, seeking warmth, that throws you in the hells. You know, that would seem, when people talk about things being fair or unfair, that would seem really unfair, right? You just got a little cold at the time of death and you go to hot hells. But if you don't have the karma to be born in the hot hells, even if you were craving warmth, that wouldn't cause the karma to be born in the hot hells to ripen. You'd be creating, maybe out of attachment, some karma that would ripen way in the future. But those minds at the time of death are the strongest ones to ripen, to quicken the karmic seeds that they're competing. Which one is biggest is going to be the one which is going to throw us into the next lifetime. So if you die with a virtuous state of mind, that can almost assure you, if you have some virtue in your mind stream, of rebirth in the upper realms. So that's why to die with a mind of refuge is so important, because that will be definitely a virtuous state of mind. Yeah.
Would it not be it would be advantageous for you to have a death that might be a little bit slower, so you can do.
It would certainly be advantageous for me. For you, it wouldn't matter. No, I'm just joking. Why you said it would be advantageous for? Okay, I'm going to say advantageous for me. For one, yeah, to be able to, like for instance, if you had if you died in a car crash, for instance, especially at that moment, you didn't. Well, you may have done in the past. You didn't do this yet. You haven't done this yet. If, for instance, if you were to have a quick death, a murder or an explosion or, a car crash or something like that, plane crash, at that moment, maybe, if you don't control your mind, it's very easy for fear to rise and for your mind to be in a state of, a negative state of mind, so that you don't have a chance to practice the Dharma. So if you can, obviously, yeah, it's better to die a little more slowly. Yeah. Sometimes, however, it happens that others, even though not purposely seeking to arouse anger, not purposely seeking to annoy the dying person with their nervousness, that nervousness thereby making him or her angry, makes them, the dying person angry, even though they don't wish to do that. So it's very important those who are around you at the time of death don't agitate you. So the caregiver at the time of death is very important in that way. And also, this is why the Kadampa Geshis wished to die like a dog in a cave without other people around, because people around fawning over you, oh, don't leave us, your loved ones, and oh, don't go, stay, or fighting over your will and testament. A friend of mine in San Francisco right now, who is terminally ill. I mean, we're all terminally ill, right? Birth is a terminal disease. His son, who is not part of his will, has been pestering him now in the last days of his life that it should be in the will. And can you imagine the state of mind that this person is experiencing at that time? So sometimes they're nervous. Sometimes also friends and relatives gather around the bed lamenting in such a manner that they arouse manifest desire, strong desire in us, not wanting to leave, grasping. Whether it be desire or hatred, if one dies within a sinful, negative attitude to which one is well accustomed, it is very dangerous. So the previous paragraph ended, it is good to die in this virtuous state of mind, and die in this way. It's very dangerous to die with a sinful attitude, especially if it's something that you have familiarized yourself with in this lifetime. That becomes even stronger. Some die within a neutral attitude, neither taking a virtuous object to mind, nor generating desire, nor hatred. What do you think? Where would they be reborn?
I think it would depend on their previous karma.
What kind of karma? Is there something between, is there some thin little area between the upper realms and the lower realms, the neutral realms?
No.
Or are they just born eternally in the bardo, which is between states? Yeah, the strongest karma. Yeah, whatever state of mind we die in, that is the main thing. Is Don, 3 stars, 5 stars for Don. 5 stars. So what the karma that is, whatever karma is already strongest because of our familiarity in this lifetime, we have quickened it in this lifetime by anger or an attachment, or by virtuous states of mind. It's just that the death mind is strongest. So if that death mind is neutral, that karma, which is already strongest, is going to be the one that throws us into the upper realm. There's only 2 ways to go, as it says in the Lan realm, either the upper realms and the lower realms. There's not a neutral realm, some thin, place in between. These 3 attitudes, virtuous, non-virtuous, and neutral, occur until the point of the subtle mind of death. He doesn't say the subtlest mind of death. That is to say, while the mind, the various elements and the winds are dissolving, are becoming less and less prominent, and the mind is becoming more and more subtle, there is still the chance of afflictions or virtuous minds up to a certain point when the mind becomes a certain degree of subtlety, which we'll be talking about. Was one of the main subjects of some of the sections in the course. According to the sutra system, that is, which doesn't talk about the same kind of subtlety of Tantra, this final subtle mind is necessarily neutral. For, unlike Highest Yoga Tantra, Sutra does not describe techniques for transforming subtle minds into virtuous states, only for treating coarse ones. Okay, so this is one of the very special features of Highest Yoga Tantra, that you can, by familiarization through meditation, that you can cause that subtle mind, which is otherwise neutral, to become a virtuous state of mind, like meditation on emptiness. Can you use the subtle, Mark, can you use the subtlemost mind, clear light mind, to meditate on compassion, on bodhicitta? I'm not going to scare you. Never.
I thought maybe your mind already had to be imbued with bodhicitta to have a clear light mind.
I mean, we have clear light. We can generate. Depends on what you mean by clear light. The subtlest mind is manifest anyway. Even when we go to sleep, even if you're a naughty boy or girl. So you don't have to have, let alone have bodhicitta. So that isn't a defining characteristic of whether the clear light manifests. When we talk about clear light, to actually recognize the clear light, that is what's sometimes called the clear light in Tantra. Venerable, did you want to say that? Okay. So generally, as we'll see, when the 80 indicative delusions absorb through the various states before the subtlemost clear light mind, even the supporting conceptual minds that are necessary for bodhicitta are absorbed. Bodhicitta itself is a primary mind, primary mental consciousness, but it's not, it needs the support of the desire to achieve enlightenment and a concern for the welfare of sentient beings. Without those, that subtlemost mind is not going to be one in which bodhicitta is manifest. So actually in the text we'll talk about that. So mainly I think can become virtuous by meditating on emptiness, that subtlemost mind. I may be wrong, but you could check. A qualified mantrika, that means a practitioner of secret mantra or tantra, however, can convert the subtle minds associated with death into a virtuous path consciousness. At that point, one's practice is very profound. Not bad, huh? In any case, the attitude just before death is very important, for if even a moderately developed practitioner, would you consider yourself moderately developed? Even if a moderately developed practitioner is disturbed at that time, at the time of death, manifest desire or hatred will be generated. So that's why the Kadampa, when you've heard about the innermost jewels of the Kadampa Geshis wishing to die in isolation in a cave, you might have thought, oh, they're social outcasts, or, they didn't want to, how ridiculous. They had great purpose in that, to be able to die without outside influences either giving rise to desire or anger and so forth. This is because we all have predispositions established by former non-virtuous actions, which are ready to be activated upon meeting with disadvantageous circumstances, adverse circumstances. In other words, even though you might be very happy walking down the street, if you step in a pile of dog dirt, you might, anger might arise in your mind. Or even your mind is very renounced and you see a nice Dhaka or Dakini walk by, desire might arise or whatever. Right? If these predispositions, that's, when we talk about the causes of the delusions in the Lan Rim, even, if you haven't gotten rid of the predisposition for anger or attachment, the imprint of that, simply meeting with a condition, something attractive or unattractive can give rise to them. If these predispositions that provide the impetus for lifetimes as animals and so forth, it is these predispositions, that provide the impetus for lifetimes as animals and so forth. Similarly, we have predispositions established by former virtuous actions, which upon meeting with advantageous circumstances will provide the impetus for lifetimes in happy migrations as humans and so forth. Does it make sense, Durji? These capacities that are already in our mental continuums, or continui, are nourished by attachment and grasping, leading to a bad or good rebirth. Thus, if the predispositions left by bad karma, the predispositions left by it, the karma is already finished, right? If the predispositions is activated, a life as an animal, hungry ghost, or a hell being will result. And similarly, if a person who usually behaves sinfully dies within a virtuous attitude, he or she will probably be born in a good situation. Because the mind of death is strongest, even as Don was saying, even if there's some other karma that's, quite like the grass that's growing, the tallest one, even if something else is quite big, the mind at death is so powerful to ripen the virtuous or non-virtuous karma on our mind stream. Therefore, it is very important for both the dying person and those around him or her to avoid creating situations of desire or hatred, and instead to foster virtuous states of mind. We need to know this. So why don't we take a little break? And we'll come back. Let's continue after tea and blankies. It's just getting cold, huh? Everyone is cold. Sometimes it was hot. Okay, so Diane has a question.
Spent 30 years in a different tradition than Buddhism. I'm a baby here.
We're all babies.
Okay, and I don't want to be a troublemaker, but I know in Buddhism it is proper to question things and to test things, and I tend to view this all pretty much psychologically. And like I know, for instance, people who are hypnotists say that when they hypnotize people, we all can remember everything from a past life, including a birthday party we went to, and the presents that were given, and all the children who were there, and the gifts, and everybody's name.
Okay, you don't have to elaborate so much detail.
Okay, so
cut through the chest.
Okay, I'm trying to say this all. So it makes perfect sense to me that when we are going through the death process, part of that, we would, and we have less control. And leaving the body, we have less control over our mind. And that the mind is then free. I remember when my father was dying, he kept saying, my mind is going crazy,
Yeah.
And that...
Well, what's your question?
The tip of the iceberg is kind of like our conscious mind, and then the underneath part is like all the things that we've collected from all our lifetimes. So it makes perfect sense to me that when we're dying, we would remember, okay, I guess what I'm trying to say is,
It's good to know what you're going to
yeah,
say.
I'm trying to say, there's no God in Buddhism, yet it's presented as if there's this living organism that exists, or a consciousness that exists in general, but I see it more like it's all personal psychology. The imprints, the seeds,
whatever doubts you're having right now, there'll be, I think, I kind of get a feeling they'll be resolved as we get a little deeper. Let me make a couple comments about that. First of all, Buddhists, you can accept Buddhism or not, but the Buddhist position. No, I'm saying in general, anyone here, Buddhist position that, as I understand it, and there may be some people who would interpret it differently, but I think according to the Tibetan tradition, especially the Gelugpa tradition, in general, it's not so easy to remember your past lives. So although it's quite popular today, in case anyone's looking at this DVD in the 22nd century or something, it's been digitally archived or in the Akashic records, we're in the year 2004 right now, tomorrow's election day. Although, at this time there are a lot of people who, what do they call it, do things like birthing, supposedly different kinds of methods to deep breathing or massage or being under the blankets and induced hypnosis or something to recall one's past lives. From a Buddhist perspective, probably not, from Buddhist perspective, because the ability to recall one's former lives, there is some karma in the youth. If you've had a very violent death in the past lifetime sometime, or very strong virtuous minds in the former lifetimes, if you have a very good concentration. Generally, the reasons for remembering past lives can be because of karma. You've created some concentration in previous lifetimes, so you can have a kind of clairvoyance that recalls past and even knows some things of the future, like maybe, who knows, maybe Edgar Cayce or people like that. There's some people, psychics, that have some ability. But those of us in general, unless we've cultivated concentration in past lifetimes, which is the main cause for clairvoyance, probably we don't have clairvoyance. It can be associations and suggestion and so forth, from a Buddhist point of view. The other way that we can recall past lives is because of this particular karma, like beings, when they're born in the God realm, they can recall for a very short time the karma that threw them into the God realm. And as they're about to die, they can have a clairvoyance that knows the karma that they created in the past that's going to throw them into the lower realms. Some beings in the Bardo and some beings in the Preta realm, other realms, may have a limited kind of clairvoyance to know the past and future. Sometimes the Pretas, some kind of spirits that we may have association with, can know things long distance in the past because they've lived 20,000 years. They experience this. It's just like me telling you what it was like when John Kennedy died or something, and someone said, "Oh, wow, you can, For them, that was before they were born, so they might think that's amazing. But the spirits that people may channel sometimes, they may not have actual clairvoyance to remember past lives. Sometimes, as it's mentioned I've mentioned before, in the Medicine Buddha Jangwa ceremony, we offer tormas, cakes, to the various spirits that may be coming to delude people that they are actually the person who just died, like Uncle Charlie has passed away. And then the spirit may come and take an appearance, an ethereal appearance to your mind as Uncle Charlie, and knows everything what Uncle Charlie told you because they were always there. That spirit was with them all that lifetime. And so we offer cakes to them and ask them to leave and not to confuse the family and friends that they're just doing this often out of, maybe they think they're, maybe in some cases they think they're being kind, or maybe they're being mischievous. But that's the general Buddhist perception. Buddhist perception also is there's no creator God, but there definitely is the omniscient mind, which is omnipotent and omnipresent, has many of the qualities of what we call God, but it doesn't create our virtue. We have to do that ourselves. It doesn't create our negativity. We have to do that ourselves. It can lead the way, and it's something that we can achieve. It's not something that we're cut off from, so divine that we can never, it's blasphemous to think that we can become Buddha. Definitely we can become Buddha. It's not blasphemous from a Buddhist perception at all. But so that mind does exist, but it's not the creator of the world in the sense that from its own side created the world. In a sense, it's a creator of all our happiness because it's given instruction through which we've practiced virtue. And we've created the karma to have happiness, so they're indirectly the creator of all of our happiness. But all these things, as we're talking in this course, a lot of this stuff will become more clear as we go into the details. So keep an open mind. It's definitely good to not accept just out of, faith alone, or just, dogma, oh, I'm a Buddhist, I have to accept this. But on the other hand, it's also good to recognize that it doesn't mean you have to argue about everything. There's some, it's sort of not this class so much. You're all pretty...
I disagree.
Yeah, that's what I thought. I remember Dorje had something about feminism one time. Buddhist was a patriarchal or something like that. Yeah, okay. Good, this is a tangible question, okay.
Unless we have realized emptiness, we have not accumulated uncontaminated karma. And my question is, I think that I have experienced emptiness for periods of time in deep meditation, where I don't remember where I was or what happened, and then I know I was somewhere, but that's what I think we're talking about. But realized emptiness, doesn't that mean that one is continually in the state of, in that state of clear light?
Here, realizing emptiness, first of all, realizing doesn't mean not having no thoughts, realizing emptiness. Like, for instance, we can have a state where we've become impersonal, as though no longer the sense of being Dion or George or David. It's like we were out of the body, just somewhere else, the vastness and so forth. Those are not at all the characteristics. Well, not at all. That's not necessarily the realization of emptiness. Even a goat in a cave might have a state like that, a mental state like that. So no, I'm just mentioning that because Lama Zopa Rinpoche's cave in Nepal is called Laudo. Laudo, I think it's there are different origins of why it's called that. One of it is where the goats lived, and another is because the radish was stored in the cave. I'm not sure which of the names, but Lama Rinpoche has mentioned sometimes, like even the goats in that cave, they don't have non-conceptualizing. There are periods they're just chewing their cud, in the long winter. They're out from the snow. They're having no thoughts, not thinking necessarily, I'm Felix the goat or whatever. And maybe in a sense just being kind of spaced out. That's not necessarily realizing emptiness at all. And I'm not being, they're laughing. I'm not trying to demean your experience, because all of our experiences have value to us. But what I'm saying is, just having a out-of-body or non-personal or a non-conceptual state is not the meaning of emptiness. Emptiness is, as we've had a chance, and as hopefully you'll have as you study more of this kind of material too, emptiness is a particular kind of state of mind that is recognizing the absence of something, the absence of a certain mode of existence that we've come to accept. Like, say, for instance, of the ego. It's not just the disappearance of the ego. That's not a big deal. We can, in deep sleep, in clear light, we have the disappearance of the ego. But that's not necessarily a realization of emptiness. Recognition of emptiness would first come about through a stage like this, when you notice how the ego seems to be appearing, and through your own reasoning that's been taught to you by the gurus, by the Buddha, you recognize the logical inconsistency of that it could not exist that way at all. When you've reached a certainty of that through reasoning, you have your first kind of insight into emptiness. Like, say, for instance, the person you thought was stealing the silverware from the kitchen, or the person that claimed they weren't, the servant claimed they weren't stealing your silverware. You actually observe for a long time, and you see them stealing the silverware, or in the surveillance cameras you see them stealing, and then you know what the situation actually is. It's not just a matter of the servant is left, and the servant's no longer there. Actually, that there are it's just the absence of the ego not appearing to your consciousness is not the meaning of emptiness, or the absence of any other kind of appearance. That's not a state of mind, a wisdom consciousness that's realizing emptiness necessarily. It's a state of mind, and of course, a wisdom consciousness is there. It will be the absence of the appearance of those things, but that absence is induced by a consciousness which has analyzed, looked at the thing, seen how it seems to be existing in one way. Seems the ego seems to be really there, the real I. Then through having familiarized yourself through reasoning and other means, accumulation of merit, you can recognize that it doesn't exist that way at all. And that recognition is something that permeates that experience of vacuity. It's not just a mere vacuity like the goat in the cave, with no thoughts. It's actually it's not thinking this is emptiness. It's not thinking there is no truly existent thing, but it has been induced by a reasoning consciousness, and so this is a wisdom consciousness that's experiencing this vacuity that knows subsequently when you arise from this, phenomena do not exist. I've just experienced that. At that point, you're not thinking I, emptiness, anything else. And again, these are things we talked about before and we will talk about during the course. So good questions. Good questions. Okay. So let's go a little bit further here. This is kind of our introductory lecture of the year. So I'm still doing the foreword. This very simple, this is before the text itself, right? So those who die within virtuous attitudes have a sense of passing from darkness into light, are free of anxiety, and see pleasant appearances. There are many cases of very ill persons who near the time of death speak of being in great comfort despite their illness. Others with little illness fall into great fright with labored breathing. These latter are sunk into non-virtuous thoughts, have a sense of going from light into darkness, and see unpleasant forms. So the attitudes at the time of death can bring about these various kinds of appearances. One sort of more optimistic, because the mind is virtuous, and leading one into the upper realms, and one which is more pessimistic and dark and even frightful. Some whose physical warmth has diminished through illness become desirous of heat, thereby fortifying predispositions for rebirth as beings in the hot hell. Fortifying, that means kind of ripening the karmic seeds for rebirth in hell. That desire for warmth is not the karma that's throwing you into the hell realm. It's something that's ripening the karma that's already there. It will create its own karma, but it's not, just desiring warmth is not enough to throw one into the hell realms in general. Others become attached to feeling of coolness by wishing, for instance, for a drink of cool water or s'mores. Be careful, Crash. They fortify predispositions to be reborn as beings in the cold hell, thereby making the connection to such a rebirth. Thus, it is very important to avoid desirous thoughts at the time of death and to direct the mind to salutary objects, virtuous objects.
Define salutary in terms of virtuous objects.
That which, for instance, if you were to incorrectly, with inappropriate attention, be thinking of the Three Musketeers bar, I don't like Three Musketeers, but anyway, say if you were thinking of that and think, oh, that's so good, nougat and chocolate, that would be not a salutary object. If you were thinking of Buddha and you were thinking of their qualities and how they had actualized the Dharma, which is beyond this world and can actually protect you from anger and attachment, which through your own experience you've seen has calmed the mind, that brings you in a mind of faith, and wisdom can be arising at that point. Those would be, for you, that would be a salutary object because it's giving rise to virtuous states of mind. To think of the suffering of sentient beings for a person who's not trained in compassion can be an object of condescension and pride. So that wouldn't be a salutary object to them. To someone trained in compassion, viewing those objects, looking with a different perspective can give rise to a virtuous state of mind, wishing them to be free of suffering, seeing the equality with them. So for you, that would be a salutary object. So salutary or virtuous object, isn't necessarily from the side of the object. Depends on how you observe it, what you're familiar with. The same, like for instance, I've told this story sometime. There was a monk at Kopan when I was first there in '75. When I was a monk, we were ordained in '75, and he was selected to be the disciplinarian of the monks. There was another nun who was selected to be the gegu, the disciplinarian of the nuns. Not a big deal, but supposed to get them up in the morning, make sure they're puja and any kind of discipline. And he was a little bit he's sort of taken it a little bit seriously, and I think it came out in some of the things that from his youth, his own interaction with his dad. Like one morning, although I loved to study and I'd never miss any of the classes, he came by my room in the morning saying, "What, you're coming to class? If you don't come, you're not getting lunch." Probably his dad said that, if you didn't go to class, you didn't get lunch, or you didn't get dinner, you didn't get to watch the TV or something like that. So, let's go back. So that same person, I know why I said that. I was thinking, why did I say that? So yeah, the moral of the story is that person can be that person at a certain point was an object of frustration and resentment, and sort of, what is this person always causing me a problem? But that we would meditate because this was what our life was trying to do. We were meditating on patience and compassion and so forth. When that person left, I went off to do another assignment somewhere, instead of a feeling of relief like, oh, finally, they're gone, phew, we can relax, there was actually a feeling of loss, that there was no longer that object which was helping me practice patience. So that whether that was a salutary object, whether that individual was a salutary object in the sense of inducing us to practice Dharma, depended on your state of mind. If you actually meditated, it could become a positive, an object of focus of your virtuous mind. If you didn't meditate, it could just be an object of, your anger. Why did they do that? In everyday life, attitudes of desire, hatred, and jealousy, and so forth, to which we are well accustomed, you could say that again, become manifest with only slight provocation. Right? Easy to get these states of mind arise. But those with which we have little familiarity take considerable provocation, such as recourse to reasoning to manifest themselves. So what does that mean? That's the kind of provocation. We have to reason sometime. This person is not bad. They're actually helping me practice patience. They themselves have been my friend in numberless lifetimes. They mean well, so forth and so on. This kind of reasoning, that kind of recourse to reasoning doesn't arise as naturally as our natural predisposition to get angry or irritated. Similarly, at the time of death, attitudes of long familiarity usually take precedence with direct the rebirth. So that's why, as I've mentioned many times in the courses, it's not sufficient to think, oh, I'll put off my practice of Dharma till the time of death, because if you can die with a virtuous state of mind, all is saved. Difficult if you haven't familiarized this lifetime to generate a virtuous state of mind at the time of death. Do you follow?
Regarding that virtuous and non-virtuous state of mind at the point of death, or a neutral one, in which we just said the strongest karma. Is that going to be just as likely to be your habituation of your mind at that?
Well, it can be. It depends. It depends on when, at the time of death, especially if there's sickness, the elements are disturbed. And I don't know if you notice, even if you're in general sort of, good-natured and happy-go-lucky and whatever, if you've got a bad sickness and there's pain and irritation, sometimes it's more difficult to control the mind. So at the time of death, when the elements are absorbing, it's much more so. Say if you've ever had jaundice or what's it called? In hepatitis in India, and it's very easy to get angry, people that are generally your friends, because there's this bile in your system and it's predisposing you to be jaundiced, have a jaundiced view. So it can be familiarity in general, but there are a lot of conditions arising there, as you said earlier, disadvantageous, adverse conditions that can cause these minds, and your relatives around, and worrying about what's going to happen, and different thoughts are much more fear arises then, because there's a sense of leaving. It's finishing. I didn't do what I wanted to. I didn't finish it yet. I want to live. I don't want to die. Isn't that what they always say in the movies, right? I don't want to die, don't kill me. This attachment serves as the connecting link to the intermediate state, the bardo, between lives. The liking of a body, in turn, acts as the cause establishing the body of the intermediate being, desiring to have a body, the grasping, craving, grasping. For those strongly involved in non-virtuous actions, the warmth of the body withdraws first from the upper part of the body. So if when a person's dying, if their feet are still warm but their head is getting cold, that is a close indication that they are going to be reborn in the lower realms. Whereas if their head is still warm and the heat is rising from the feet are getting cold, that's an indication that they're going to be born in the upper realms. Not definite yet, but that's some indication. For those strongly involved in non-virtuous actions, the warmth of the body withdraws first from the upper part of the body and then from the other parts. Whereas for those strongly involved in virtuous actions, the warmth first withdraws from the feet. In both cases, the warmth finally gathers at the heart from which the consciousness exits. Those particles of matter of combined semen and blood that are what we say the semen, the seminal fluid of our father and the egg of our mother, into which the consciousness initially entered in the mother's womb at the beginning of this life, become the center of the heart, and from that very same point the consciousness ultimately departs at death. There is some of that initial element still within our heart chakra. Immediately thereupon, the intermediate state, the bardo, in Tibetan we say the bardo, begins, except for those reborn in the formless realms of infinite space, infinite consciousness, or nothing, infinite consciousness, nothingness, or peak of cyclic existence. There's 4 formless absorptions, for whom, if you're going to be born in those, the new life begins immediately upon death. Anyone else, even if you're born in the hell realms, you still have to go through the bardo. Did you know that, Georgie? There's still a bardo state for the hell beings, and the body of the bardo being has an appearance as your hell existence will look like. It will look, the bardo being will have an appearance as your next life. It will look like a dog if you're going to be born, small dog if you're going to be born as a dog, or a small cockroach or whatever, s'mores or whatever. Those born within the realms of desire and form, the desire realm and the form realm, must pass through an intermediate state, during which a being has the form of the person as whom he or she is to be reborn. The intermediate being has all 5 senses, but also clairvoyance, as Deanne was talking about, whether people, can remember their past lives. They can remember past things. Unobstructiveness and the ability to arrive immediately wherever he or she wants. He or she sees other intermediate beings of his or her own type. Like if you're going to be born in hell, you see other hell beings, hungry ghost beings, animal beings, or whatever, and can be seen by clairvoyance. So maybe some of the people who channel or have seances, they're actually perceiving, sometimes they may be perceiving intermediate state beings. Sometimes they may be perceiving beings that have already been reborn as hungry ghosts or as gods of the desire realm. In a place of birth appropriate to one's if a place of birth appropriate to one's predispositions is not found, a small death occurs after 7 days, and one is reborn into another intermediate state. This can occur at most 6 times, so 6 deaths, so there'll be 7 periods of 7 days each, with the result of the longest period spent in the intermediate state being 49 days. This means that those beings who, even a year after dying, report that they have not found a birthplace are not in the intermediate state, but have taken birth as a spirit. So this is His Holiness's commentary. So you can say, well, other people say, well, this is what His Holiness says from the Buddhist scriptures. If taking rebirth as a human, one sees one's future mother and father as if lying together in sexual embrace. If one is to be reborn as a male, this sight generates desire for the mother, what do we talk, mother's son, as well as hatred for the father, And vice versa if one is to be born as a female. If one is to be born as a female, one has attraction to the father and repulsion for the mother. Being desirous, one rushes there to engage in copulation, but upon arrival, one sees only the sexual organ of the desired partner. This creates anger, maybe frustration, which causes cessation of the intermediate state and makes the connection to the next life. So at that point, one enters into, let's say, the fertilized egg. One has entered the mother's womb and begun a human life. When the father's semen and mother's blood are conjoined with this life or consciousness, they naturally and gradually develop into the elements of a human. One is desirously attracted to one's future birthplace, even if it is to be a hell. I think this is talking about the bardo being. For instance, a butcher might see sheep in the distance as in a dream. That means a person in the previous life who had been a butcher, in the bardo state, they would see, when they're about to take rebirth in the hell realms, they would see sheep and be attracted there. Upon rushing there to kill them, the appearance would fade, causing him or her, the female butchers, to become angry, whereupon the intermediate state would cease and the new life in hell begins. So it's not only seeing father and mother. If you're going to be born in a womb, you see father and mother, and anger arises at that point. If you're going to be born in the hell realms, it's that anger and the ceasing of the intermediate state. His Holiness mentions it brings about, and it comes about in a different way. Also, as said before, those to be reborn in hot hells are attracted to heat. Those to be born in cold hells are attracted to coolness. The intermediate state of one who is to be reborn in a bad migration is itself very frightful. The bardo state itself is frightful if you're going to be born in the lower realms. In the end, one rushes to the place of rebirth, and when one's wish is not achieved, one gets angry, whereupon the intermediate state ceases and the new life begins. So it's similar in all of the cases in ceasing the bardo. The connection to a life is, therefore, made under the influence of desire, hatred, and ignorance. Until these afflictions are overcome, one is as if bound in chains without freedom. Indeed, there are good and bad rebirths, but while one is still bound, one must bear the burden of mental and physical aggregates that are under the influence of contaminated actions and afflictions. Under the influence of them, that means contaminated actions that we created in the past, the karmic imprints that are on our mind, control us. The instincts to generate contaminated actions due to afflictions, all of this are sort of like chains that bind us in samsara. This is not done just once, but again and again without break, this cycle and cyclic existence in samsara. To overcome the suffering of birth, aging, sickness, and death, desire, hatred, and confusion must be overcome. Their root, in turn, is ignorance. Not just ignorance of something, not knowing something, but actual misdirected wisdom, the conception of inherent existence of persons and phenomena, grasping to persons and phenomena as being truly existent. External medicines alleviate superficial suffering but cannot cure the central problem. If anyone here can devise a medicine to get rid of ignorance of true existence, Jesse, that's your next chore, okay? Mark, if you can patent that, we're okay. Internal practices such as resorting to specific antidotes to desire and hatred are more helpful, but their effects are temporary. Those are temporal antidotes, overcoming, different ways to meditate on impermanence, or the enemy is, this person is not a suitable object to get angry at because they themselves are under the influence of their afflictions. This is impermanent. They are helping me alleviate my negative karma. All of these are temporal antidotes. However, if one can destroy ignorance, their root, then all of these cease of their own accord. So, like the skillful person who knows the essential point, like there's maybe some big table that you have to disassemble, and you can, try to shake it and get it. If you know the right piece to pull out, maybe the whole thing falls apart, right? So ignorance is that essential element. if you know the vital point. Furthermore, without ignorance, the attachment and grasping that fortify the predispositions established by previous actions cease to operate. What does that mean? It's a very complicated sentence, but it's very simple, right? Without ignorance, at the time of death, the craving and grasping that causes our karmic seeds to get stronger and throw us into the lower realms, that there is no craving and grasping at the time of death like that for another rebirth, so one will, whereupon the cycle of uncontrolled rebirth is ended. So that's just the foreword of the book, right? So it's worth reading. This is His Holiness. I mean, His Holiness just, it's sort of like, okay, maybe we stop the course now. That's essentially the whole course, right? I mean, there's more detail, but essentially His Holiness probably just wrote and just dictated to Tenzin Gyatso or something, and that the Buddha can do, you know. Nice. Get forward, huh? So now, I won't go through Jeffrey Hopkins' preface. You can read that. You can get the book. But just for auspiciousness, we'll start tonight with the beginning of the text by Akyo Yonzen. Does anyone, by the way, anyone have questions? How are we doing? Carrie, are you okay? Did you drive over here on your bike tonight? Rode over. You didn't drive over. It's pretty dark on 17, huh?
Don't do 17.
Okay.
I have a headlamp that doesn't illuminate the room.
Golly gee.
No, thank you.
He's got his bike. So, there on page something or other, doesn't have the page number on it, is the title. What's it? 26, 25, 24, 23. Lamp thoroughly illuminating the presentation of the three basic bodies: death, intermediate state, and rebirth. So those of you who were following the Tibetan texts, Shi Kusum, the three bodies of the basis, Ginamshak. Namshak means presentation. Rabsel means illuminating. Dronme means lamp. Shejawa, Shukso. Shejawa means so-called. This is the so-called lamp thoroughly illuminating the presentation of the three basic bodies. And the title doesn't use the word death, intermediate state, and rebirth. That's sort of put as an explanatory statement. This was written by Yangchen Gawe Lodro, who's also known as Akyo Yongzen. And as I mentioned before, this was a lama that we'd encountered some texts of before. So this is a text that it's related with Highest Yoga Tantra. So introduction. So in the text itself, the commentary by Lati Rinpoche is slightly smaller writing. Can you see that, Venerable? You have the same, like in the introduction, do you see where it says homage to the Lord of Union, that's slightly larger type? And in the printout, those of you who have the sheet, you can see slightly bigger type. And then where afterwards, that's commentary. So we'll try to make some commentary also. So it begins, Namo Guru Manju Goshaya. Manju Gosha is another name, as we've seen in other cases, of Manjushri, right? It's another way of saying Manjushri. Namo Guru Manju Goshaya. So homage to the Lord of Union. So this is indicating Vajradhara, the union of bliss and emptiness. Master over the iron elements of birth, death, and the bardo, which are the bases to be purified. The bases of purification. When it says bases of purification, it means that which is to be purified according to Highest Yoga Tantra is ordinary birth, ordinary death, and ordinary bardo. That's what we have to transform according to secret mantra to achieve enlightenment. So Vajradhara, the Lord of Union, is the master over these iron-like elements that are going to be transformed in kind of the alchemical, is that the right way to say it? Alchemical? Alchemical? Alchemical, okay, anyway, through the alchemy of Tantra. master over the iron elements. That's why it's called the iron elements. They're just mean now, the ordinary birth, death, and bardo, that which is to be purified. The master over their transformation into the gold, the three bodies of purity, that's the gold, by the two stages of the profound path. What are the two stages of the profound path? Right, the generation is talking about the stages of Tantra, which are the purifiers. So that which is to be purified is ordinary birth, death, and bardo. That which purifies it are the two stages, and that which is the fruit of that purification and the gold, the sort of like the iron is the birth, death, and bardo, the alchemal method is the two stages, and the gold that is the result are the precious three bodies of purity, the fruits of purification. What are the three bodies of purity? Richard Gere? Emanation. Emanation body, which is called what? Nirmanakaya.
Right, and the truth body.
Truth body, which is called what?
The Dharmakaya.
Dharmakaya.
And the third one, can't remember.
Perfect enjoyment body.
The Sambodhikaya. Good. So sometimes, like, there's some scholars who talk, sometimes we talk about four bodies, sometimes we talk about three bodies. The origin of three bodies seems to be more prevalent in the Tantras, because when we talk about purifying these three states, we talk about purifying into those three bodies, the Nirmanakaya, Sambhogakaya, and Dharmakaya. So in the sutras, there might be more relevance of four bodies, breaking up the Dharmakaya into the two Dharmakayas, the wisdom Dharmakaya and the nature Dharmakaya, right? But anyway, there's some of my friends write scholarly papers about that. So Lati Rinpoche's commentary says, obeisance is made to Manjugosha, or in other words, Manjushri, at the beginning of the text for the sake of accumulating merit and thereby avoiding obstacles to completing the composition. So this is one of the reasons, as Rinpoche, Lama Zopa Rinpoche was saying yesterday at the Long Life Puja, it's so important for us to accumulate merit to in general, not just to complete a text, but to complete our Dharma practice. So if this is even when you see a salutation like that at the beginning of the author, that they would go to the effort, and as is the custom of making a salutation like that, creating some merit right at the beginning so that their composition will be auspicious, that will be completed, to eliminate obstacles to completing it, that can remind us to practice Dharma, to accumulate merit all the time, even in offering every drink and morsel you eat and so forth, and when you put on your clothes, offering all of those enjoyments to the Buddhas to accumulate merit so that your Dharma practice can be successful. It is done in Sanskrit, that is, it says Namo Guru Manjugoshya. That's not Tibetan, that's actually Sanskrit. This salutation is done in Sanskrit to remember the source language of the teachings, as well as its translation into Tibetan, and especially to recall the kindness of the translators, and to establish predispositions for learning Sanskrit, which is said to be all of the Buddhas will teach in that language, which is called well-formed. We might say Sanskrit, well-formed, and leaving imprints to know Sanskrit, so when the Buddhas appear, we will be able to understand the Dharma easily. Manjugosha is the embodiment of the wisdom of all the Buddhas. Manju means soft or smooth, indicating that his continuum has become softened due to abandoning the afflictive obstructions to liberation. The obstructions to liberation as opposed to the obstructions to omniscience. And the non-afflictive obstructions, that means the obstructions to omniscience, those two, his mind has become soft by abandoning them, or smooth. Gosha means intonation, yang, in Tibetan, like Jampel Yang, referring to his possession of possessing a Buddha's 60 branches of perfect vocalization, the 60 Brahma-like qualities of speech. When single-minded faith is put in Manjugosha, one's wisdom increases quickly. So you know Sayangla. You know, people say Zenla, the Yangtze Rinpoche's sister. So her name is actually Sering Yangzom. So they shorten it to Say Yang, the same Yang as here, the Gosha. And then people start saying Sayang, Senla. So her name is actually Seyang. Sering means long life. Yangzom, Yangzom, Yang means this vocalization. This being a treatise on the Tantra division of Buddha's word, homage is made to Vajradhara, who is the Lord of Union. In that, the union of clear light and illusory body has come under his control. So, again, in Tantra, when we talk about the Vajra being an immutable union of two truths, you can talk about a union of bodhicitta and emptiness. There are one mind realizing both, you know, the Buddhist state. Or you can talk about, in a more sophisticated way, bliss and emptiness, or even a deeper way, the illusory body in clear light. So there's different meanings of union at different stages along the path. Sometimes it's explained in different ways at different stages. The homage indicates the contents of the book. Yes? The iron elements to be transformed are birth, death, and the bardo, the intermediate state, between lives, the bases on which the transformational agents act. Do all of Buddhists believe in the bardo? Fun, do you know?
They do. I mean, there is a hospice in San Francisco where they teach it.
They teach what?
They go through the Tibetan process of explaining to Zen Buddhists who are going to die how the bardo works.
Do you know, Mark Bickler, do you know, do all Buddhists believe in the bardo, the intermediate state? You studied the courses. So in the Theravada tradition, in the Hinayana, some of the Vaibhashikas do not accept the bardo, because sometimes the Buddha says when a person dies here, later they're reborn here. You know, as though just the mind ceases in one place and rises somewhere else. But that's how it appears, because the bardo is a subtle body, whereas there are other indications, not even in the sutras, even in the sutra traditions, not necessarily talking about Tantra. The bardo is even accepted in some Hinayana schools, but not all. So if you run across some Theravada monks, maybe from, I can't remember which is more prevalent, in Thailand or Ceylon, where there's more prevalence of it, they may not accept, or they think it's a figment of someone else's imagination, that there is an intermediate state. But many Hinayana tenets do accept. Certainly the Mahayana, Sutra Mahayana accepts, and in Tantra there's much explanation in analogy to the dream state between falling asleep and waking, a subtle kind of body, like the dream body. It's mentioned in, it can be found in the sutras, yeah. It's not just in Tantra. Even in the Hinayana you can find some mention of it. The alchemical means, the methods that bring about this change of the ordinary death and intermediate state and rebirth, are the stages of generation and completion and generation stage of Highest Yoga Tantra, Highest Yoga Mantra, the highest of the 4 sets of tantras. Can the lower tantras, Kriya Tantra and so forth, can they purify birth, death, and intermediate state? Short answer, no. Because they don't even talk about them. In fact, in general, when you practice Kriya Tantra and other tantras, you don't necessarily go through the death evolution. When you generate yourself as a deity, that's not part of the process. It might be grafted onto them, but that's not part of the process. The process of visualizing the death evolution, taking the three bodies into the path is something that's exclusive to Highest Yoga Tantra. The gold products are the three Buddha's bodies, not the three Buddha's bodies, the three Buddha bodies, three bodies of a Buddha, the truth body, the complete enjoyment body, the Sambhogakaya, and the emanation body, or the Nirmanakaya, or Tulku. You've heard someone called Tartan Tulku? So that usually indicates, if they have the name Tulku after their name, usually indicates that they're recognized not as a Nirmanakaya, but as someone who has practiced Tantra in previous lifetimes and is kind of like, this life is kind of an emanation. Doesn't necessarily mean they're necessarily Buddha. Sometimes you hear people called Rinpoche at the end of their names, but you can't be assured that they're actually recognized as an incarnate Lama, because sometimes we just call the abbots of the monastery, or your teacher, you might say Gen Rinpoche, precious teacher. But if Tulku comes at the end of the name, usually that means that they are recognized as an incarnation. Sometimes Lama Sopa Rinpoche is called Sopa Tulku. Vajradhara has mastery over the process of purification. By praising him in this way, the opening lines point to the contents of the rest of the treatise, a description of birth, death, and the intermediate state, as well as their transformation. So the actual title of the text doesn't talk about death, intermediate state, and rebirth, but that's the main subject. Okay. In order to know then the root text again, in order to know the mode of procedure of the two stages of highest yoga mantra, it's a synonym here of Tantra, it is very important to understand the presentation of the bases of purification, the three basic bodies. So here it's called birth, death, and intermediate state are called bodies, as in the title. When you might think, well, those don't sound like bodies to me, right? Usually you think of body as being something more substantial. Birth and death and intermediate state are states, right? You can have an intermediate state body. You can have a rebirth, a body that you take upon rebirth and so forth, and the body that you left upon death. For through the profound short path of highest yoga mantra, the body of union, having the 7 features of God and Goddess facing each other, can be actualized in one short lifetime of this degenerate era. So the 7 qualities, what did it say? 7 features of God and Goddess facing each other, the body of union. So this comes up many times when we talk about the 7 kisses. Have you heard of that expression before, and so forth? So this is some information that's worth memorizing, knowing. Sometimes people ask, why do you have 7 bowls in Buddhism? Is it just a good number? It's auspicious? Is it, what is it in Platonic philosophy or something? It's supposed to be a nice number or something? From a Buddhist perspective, one of the highest meanings of that is that it's auspicious because the enlightened state achieved through secret mantra, through Tantra, has these 7 features. One, through secret mantra, highest yoga Tantra, one doesn't achieve enlightenment as just as a solitary figure. One deity. One always is embrace with a consort. Even if some of the highest yoga Tantras have solitary forms, like Yamantaka or whatever, solitary Yamantaka, in the completion stage, one still visualizes embracing a consort. So that has to do with the symbolic sense of experiencing great bliss and so forth, and for the benefit of others to propagate that understanding. So what are these 7 features of God and Goddess facing one another? That means oneself as, say, Vajradhara embracing the consort. The feature of complete enjoyment, meaning having all the major and minor marks of a Buddha. So the state of union achieved through the practice of highest yoga Tantra, one visualizes and brings about a state of having these major and minor marks. How many major marks are there? 5? Oh, 5 minutes. I was just teasing. I knew there was nothing. How many major marks are there in the Buddha's body? And how many minor marks, minor exemplification? 84? 80. 80, right. So then the second feature, God and Goddess facing each other, that's the name of the feature, with the aspect of father and mother in union, embracing one another, whether they're seated or standing or whatever, in union, sexual union, appearing outside of sexual union. Third quality, feature, great bliss, manifesting a subtle bliss consciousness. So their mind, the Buddha's mind that is brought about, the state of Vajradhara that's brought about through Highest Yoga Tantra, having these 7 features, is one that experiences, like the Buddha, through the practice of secret mantra, one is cultivating this subtle bliss consciousness, and that brings about the feature of a subtle bliss consciousness. Fourth feature, non-inherent existence, a bliss consciousness in meditative equipoise on the emptiness of inherent nature, on inherent existence, in a non-dualistic manner, like water put into water. So this is talking about the corresponding part of great bliss. This is talking about the bliss consciousness itself. That's the subjective mind. Its object is emptiness, what it's realizing in a non-dualistic, direct manner, not in a conceptual way. That's the resultant state of achieving that. It has to be realized conceptually, first of all, but eventually non-conceptually. Fifth feature, completely filling, it says, with compassion. Maybe, I'm not sure why filling. A mental continuum always and thoroughly suffused with compassion for sentient beings. Sixth, uninterrupted continuity, not abiding in the extremes of either cyclic existence or solitary peace. Remember we talked about in the Lanrim course the fears of samsara and nirvana? And so here, not abiding in the extremes of either, on the one side, one extreme is cyclic existence, samsara. The other extreme is solitary peace of nirvana. So not abiding in either of those extremes. And non-cessation, the seventh feature, abiding for the welfare of sentient beings until cyclic existence is, literally it says in Tibetan it says emptied, means until cyclic existence is emptied of sentient beings or finished. So these are just explanatory points. It's not part of the root text, these 7. So it's nice to know that, to memorize that, and you may see that list if you do any sadhana. If you do the Vajrayogini sadhana or something, there's praises to Vajrayogini, which are, each of the verses is talking about one of these 7 features and so forth. Therefore, I, Akya Yongzin, will explain birth, death, and intermediate state, the bases purified by the 2 stages of the path. The explanation has 3 parts. The stages of death, we'll begin next time. The stages of achieving the intermediate state. It's not as though something you achieve by some kind of practice. Is that actual, how the intermediate state is brought about after death, and the way that a being in the intermediate state takes birth. Okay. Yes.
I can understand why there's 6 of these are qualities, but I don't understand why the god and goddess facing each other in union is what quality does that?
Well, because I think one way to understand that is, say for instance, once you've achieved enlightenment, you don't always manifest in this fashion. You manifest in many different ways. Sometimes as a solitary Buddha, sometimes as not a Buddha. Shakyamuni didn't appear upon birth embracing a consort, right? And Buddhas appear in many other ways. But through the practice, that which brings about enlightenment in secret mantra is a path that one cultivates, visualizing oneself in that way. And the first result is the achievement of a Buddha state having these 7 features through the Highest Yoga Tantra. So that is not, through the practice of paramita yana, one doesn't talk about the bodhisattvas embracing a consort in general. It's said in the Highest Yoga Tantra treatises that even if someone practices the Bodhisattva path, and for all intents and purposes, according to the Sutrayana, one has achieved enlightenment. One hasn't really achieved enlightenment yet. Even at that last point, on the 10th bhumi, one receives initiation and wisdom consort and achieves enlightenment in this way. Does that help? So that is a special feature of, sometimes it's called the 7 kisses. Actually, kisses means kajor. Ka means mouth, jor means joined. Ka can also mean facing. So that here he's translated as God and Goddess facing one another. Sometimes the 7 features, sometimes they call it the 7 kisses. Ka meaning mouth, joined. So you might see it translated that way. What do you think? Does it sound like interesting material? So if you have a chance to, I think the bookstore has ordered the text and should be here by Thursday, but we'll have enough reading material for the next class. So try to read ahead, and if you have questions, write them out, get them clear, and we've got plenty of time to do all Deanne's questions, David's questions, Mark's questions, and let's finish with a dedication. Meditation. The 3 important times, the beginning, middle, and end of any action. Beginning to motivate, the middle to do the action completely, as precisely as possible with concentration. At the end, to dedicate the merit created. So we've created merit this evening with good motivation, listening to the teachings, as we motivated, first of all. Let's try to dedicate that merit, that it ripen in our quick achievement of enlightenment. In the case of as with the 7 features of father and mother facing one another, through the practice of Highest Yoga Tantra, so that we can, until samsara is emptied, work spontaneously, effortlessly, most effectively for the welfare of all sentient beings. Seal that dedication with the emptiness of the 3 spheres. Meditation on the emptiness of the merits, the goal dedicated to, and the act of dedication. All are empty of true existence.